I'd like to have the panelists now introduce themselves in any order that you wish. We do have you on for a full hour, and we really look forward to this long-awaited discussion about Pebble Mine.
I'll start. I'm Rick Eichstaedt. I'm the policy advisor for the Tribal Caucus of the RTOC, and I'm here today to moderate this panel, and at the end, if we have time, to ask the panelists questions. All right, well, thanks everybody for your patience as we struggle here with some of the technical difficulties in the new COVID world of virtual conferences. As Randy mentioned, we've got representatives today from the Army Corps, from EPA, and from the and from the United Tribes of Bristol Bay to speak on this really important and timely topic of Pebble Mine. If you have questions today, we can't obviously ask live, but please include them in the live chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll be able to ask the panelists questions. If your question is directed to a specific speaker, please indicate that in the chat. So just very briefly, I think many of us know about Pebble Mine, but for those of you who don't, it is located, or proposed to be located, in the headwaters of Bristol Bay near Lake Alannah, and this map indicates roughly where it is and in proportion to the state of Alaska. It is as I mentioned, it would be located in southwestern Alaska on state land on top of one of the largest known gold deposits in the world. If it's built, it would be North America's largest gold and copper mine, potentially producing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of metal. It would be a mine about 1 mile deep and or 1 mile wide and about a quarter mile deep, alter approximately 3,000 acres of wetlands and more than 21 miles of stream, plus additional acres associated with a road and pipeline. Obviously, in addition to having the mine itself, you need infrastructure to support it. So it would include a massive tailings storage facility, treatment ponds, and associated dams and embankments blocking and inundated salmon streams. It would construct a road with additional stream crossings and bridges, an icebreaker barge system across Lake Alannah with 2 lakeside terminals, private and large port facility on Cook Inlet, a power plant, a 230 megawatt power plant, approximately 15 miles upwind from Lake Clark National Park. It would lay 188-mile long natural gas pipeline over the land and under Cook Inlet and Alannah Lake. And at closure, it would require the backhaul of 1.1 billion tons of waste into the pit to be monitored and maintained in perpetuity. The mine and supporting facilities are currently proposed to be run continuously for 20 years. Although anybody who's been watching the news lately, the now former CEO has indicated that that may be for much, much longer. So this, as I said, is a very timely issue, and as I believe as of yesterday, has their CEO was forced to resign. So with that, I think if our technology is up to speed.
Hi, good morning. So this is Lieutenant Colonel Bladel. I'm the Deputy Commander here at Alaska District. And I have Sheila Newman in here with me. And she is our Deputy Regulatory Chief here at the district. And we're both here prepared to talk a little bit about the process and the work done here so far with us at Alaska District. Before I turn it over to Sheila, I do have a few remarks. So first of all, it is an honor to be invited to participate in the panel today and represent the Army Corps to your nations. We believe in our trust responsibility to Alaska Natives and really all Native American tribes and I'm proud to provide you a brief background on our mission here in Alaska. So the regulatory program within the Corps, their mission is to protect the nation's aquatic resources and navigable capacity, but to allow for some reasonable development through fair and balanced decisions. We regulate the discharge of dredge and fill materials, other construction-related activities that would affect jurisdictional waters of the United States. It's mandated in Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act, 1899, and Section 103 of the Marine Protection Research and Sanctuaries Act. So, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide information on our mission and processes at the forum. I'm going to turn it over to Sheila, though, to talk specifics about our role in the Pebble permit application process and to answer questions you have on that process, although I'm here for the duration of the panel as well.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I echo the Lieutenant Colonel's remarks. Thank you for the opportunity for us to explain our role in reviewing a permit application submitted under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act and Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. As many of you are aware, Pebble Limited Partnership submitted an application to the United States Army in December of 2017 seeking authorization under these two acts to discharge fill material for construction of a surface mine and the associated infrastructure to support that mine. Over the last couple of years, we've written an environmental impact statement meant to disclose the impacts associated with their proposed discharges to the public and to inform subsequent decisions under the Clean Water Act and Rivers and Harbors Act. The environmental impact statement was written to fulfill requirements under the National Environmental Policy Act, and that act is applicable to every major federal action that may have significant consequences on the environment. We made that determination back in 2017 that this proposal would have significant consequences. The environmental impact statement, as the requirement of NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, is not a permit decision. And I know that this has caused confusion for folks, but again, the purpose of the environmental impact statement is to disclose information to the public and inform subsequent federal decisions. We completed that final environmental impact statement in July of this year, and then we turned our attention to substantive determinations under our specific authorities. And primarily the first issue we tackled were the substantive requirements under the Clean Water Act. We worked very closely with our sister agencies, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Fish and Wildlife Service, to make determinations under the Clean Water Act. And the outcome of our work together was a consensus finding that the proposed discharges would cause significant degradation within the Coctuli River watershed. We sent a letter to Pebble Limited Partnership identifying our finding on August 20th of this year. That letter is publicly available for folks to see on our website, which has all of our project documents. That website is pebbleprojecteis.com, and I can certainly share that letter and that link with the facilitators. I think it's important for folks to understand what that letter we sent to Pebble means. Very specifically, what we shared with the applicant is that their discharges, as they have proposed them, are not permittable under the Clean Water Act. They have an opportunity to potentially overcome this finding with compensatory mitigation. In that same letter, we identified the required compensatory mitigation, and we developed that requirement, again, working in partnership with the EPA and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we very specifically said to them in our August 20th letter that because we have found significant degradation in the Coctuli River watershed, to overcome that significant degradation, you must provide sufficient mitigation in the Coctuli River watershed. They have not yet produced a compensatory mitigation plan for us to review. We did give them 90 days from the date of August 20th to produce that plan, which means we anticipate by November 20th they will have submitted a plan for our review. That specific requirement is only one part of the federal decision under the Corps of Engineers specific authority. In addition to their requirement to produce rule-compliant compensatory mitigation, any permit for a discharge of fill material under our program must also first receive a water quality certification from the state of Alaska's Department of Environmental Conservation. That is often called a 401 certificate. Pebble has applied to the state for that permit, however, that decision is pending. Additionally, they must go through consultations with the Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service for endangered species. Those consultations are ongoing with those agencies. And finally, the Corps decision must also include a public interest review. And to issue a permit, the finding must be that the discharge is not contrary to the public interest. We are currently in a deliberative process regarding the public interest review. And we are working diligently to ensure we've captured all of the input that we received through public comment, consultations, and cooperating agency engagement. But we have not yet completed that, and that is a separate requirement than the compliance required under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. I hope that this provides a brief overview of why the Army is involved, what the process is, and what the next steps may be. And again, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to share the Army's role in the process, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Why don't we save questions to the end? And so let's hear from Chris Hladick from EPA.
Thank you, and thank you to the Corps for your explanation of the process. We have been involved with the Corps since the beginning. We're a co-regulator with the 404, the wetlands permitting process, and we have worked closely with the Corps of Engineers on this project for many, many months in close consultation with them and the Fish and Wildlife Service as well. And I believe in your slide you mentioned the crossing of the lake, but I believe the least environmentally damaging alternative would be the northern route that is currently being discussed right now and requires quite a bit of mitigation. Our working relationship with the Corps is probably the best that it's been in quite some time, and I think it's largely due to the fact that Dave Hobby and Sheila Newman have worked on the process. I mean, as regulators, we are protectors of the process, and I know a lot of people have asked, why don't you just shut this project down? And that's not what we do as regulators. Everybody has a right to submit a permit, and they have a right to process that's within our regulations and the intent of Congress to see if the project can be permitted under the statutory regulations that we have to live by. We have to live within those boundaries. And so very much appreciate the work that Dave Hobby and Sheila Newman have put into this, as well my staff, Dan Opalski and Andrew Baca, head of our NEPA program. So we were very much involved in the NEPA process and providing comments on the EIS, and also in discussions with the Corps. Of course, the EIS informs the 404 process, delineates the amount of wetlands that are impacted, et cetera, and some of the concerns, such as but not limited to the water treatment facility that would be required in perpetuity, such issues as dust from acid-producing rock, and of course the stream crossings, et cetera. But really appreciate the work that the Corps of Engineers has put into this process, and we've been working very well together with them on the getting to their decision on finding of significant degradation. So that kind of lays out our part of the process. And as Sheila said, ESA is something that they're working on now, the Endangered Species Act, with the salmon in the Cockatoolie River, etc. Back to you, Rick.
Thanks, Chris. Now we'd like to hear from Elena Hurley, the Executive Director of the United Tribes of Bristol Bay.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. Alannah, to all the organizers and the people who gave us this opportunity to share the voices of Bristol Bay's Yupik and Analyst tribes today. My Yupik name is RTOC and my Irish name is actually Alannah Hurley, and I have the privilege of working for the United Tribes of Bristol Bay, commonly known as UTBB. We're a tribally chartered consortium that represents 15 tribal governments that span across the entire Bristol Bay region and all of our waterways, from Non-Dalton, the closest community to the Pebble Project, to Pedro Bay on Lake Iliamna, to Chignik Lake on the southern peninsula, and to Togiak on our western borders. We represent over 80% of the total population of the people that live in Bristol Bay are people who still live a traditional way of life, hunting, gathering, and fishing, as our ancestors have for millennia. And our mission is simple. It's to protect those native ways of life that have been sustained by our pristine lands and waters since time immemorial. Part of this mission includes opposing unsustainable and destructive development like the Pebble Mine. We are fighting for our basic human and sovereign rights as Native people, and like our ancestors, we're fighting for the survival of our cultures for our generations to come. Our tribes have participated in the Pebble EIS process from the very start. Some served as cooperating agencies, some tried to engage the Corps in government-to-government consultation. All of us turned out for public hearings and events related to the mine. And from the start, we have questioned some of the decisions by the Corps and the EPA. The accelerated timeline, the lack of consultation, the limited hearing locations, the silencing of our concerns and refusal to address impacts to our cultural resources in a meaningful and significant way. It all led us to believe that there was something going on behind the scenes. And now we have the truth. The Pebble tapes that were released just this Monday confirm that from start to finish, the Pebble EIS process was owned and operated by the Pebble Limited Partnership. The videos detail the unprecedented level of support that the Pebble Mine and its parent company, Northern Dynasty, is receiving from boosters in the state and federal government, and the Alaska congressional delegation's seeming willingness to quietly allow the process to proceed without stopping the project. The videos also show Pebble's deceptions to the public and potential investors as it seeks to build one of the world's largest open pit mines at the headwaters of our life-sustaining watershed and fishery. In these videos, recorded by the Environmental Investigation Agency, Northern Dynasty President and CEO Ron Thiessen and the Pebble Limited Partnership CEO Tom Collier outlined the company's efforts to curry favor with state and federal officials, to rush the permitting process and avoid the usual standards for a permit decision. The videos also prove discrepancies between the plan the company is touting to the public and their private plans for a much larger mine shared with investors and federal regulators. Thiessen and Collier detailed regular meetings with the Army Corps' top staff with top Pebble employees and explained how the company uses Alaska's governor to make requests to the White House on their behalf. He also noted that the Army Corps chose to apply a streamlined permitting process to this project with no authority to do so to support the company in its efforts. Further, the video shows that Pebble's mitigation plan will not meet a rigorous threshold and that the company has been working hand in hand with the Army Corps and the state of Alaska on that plan, with both planning to approve it and allow the project to proceed to a record of decision in the near term. Thiessen and Collier's statements also make clear that Alaska senators have been the target of Pebble's deceitful efforts. The tapes detail clear plans for future expansion, include the admission that the current mine plan is not ready for construction, contains falsehoods about permitting requirements and local support. The statements also confirm what technical experts have been saying for years. Pebble's plan is extremely incomplete, not yet ready for construction, which means that the environmental review is based on a fictional mine plan, not a plan grounded in construction and environmental realities. But please don't take my word for this. Go and watch the videos released by the EA on Monday yourselves. They paint a clear and undeniable picture that Pebble's permitting process has been poisoned by the influence of this Canadian mining company that has terrorized our region for almost 20 years, almost my entire adult life. Throughout the Pebble tapes that were released this week, there are countless examples of Pebble having access to information, guidance, and counsel from federal regulators that was never made available to cooperating agencies like some of our Bristol Bay tribes. It's clear that there has been a level of consultation, pre-screening, and assistance that borders on conspiracy. The content of these tapes expose the truth about not only Pebble's true intentions in Bristol Bay to transform all of Southwest Alaska into a toxic mining district for the next 200 years, but also to the disturbing extent to which they've worked with state and federal regulators, like the ones presenting today and their colleagues, to ensure their permit is rubber stamped. For example, I'd just like to read you some of the excerpts from these videos. Ron Thiessen, the CEO of Northern Dynasty, said, well, who's going to stop a mine that has 180 at 160,000 metric tons per day? The first deposit that we've discovered at Pebble, and there will be more, but the first one lasts 180 years. I'm not aware, certainly I'm not aware of a project in Alaska where an expansion has ever been turned down. And off the top of my head, I can't think of one in America. Once you have something like this in production, why would you want to stop? The Northern Corridor infrastructure part will handle the expansion. The investigator asked, how locked are we into thinking about planning to go beyond 20 years, 180 years or so? Ronald Thiessen replied, well, it's absolutely, because the ore is there. We've drilled it. We've engineered it. All the work has been done for it. That was from Ron Thiessen himself. Yet the Corps has refused to assess the impacts of a full build-out or the impacts of a tailings dam failure for even this fake mine plan, and is about to release a ROD on mining less than 15% of the ore body. Here's a little more from the tapes on their collusion with the Corps. Ron Thiessen says, so Tom Collier meets every week with the fellow that runs the Army Corps of Engineers in the region. He lives in Anchorage. His name is David Hobby. David Hobby, when Trump was elected, had Hobby sent to the White House to work on streamlining permitting processes for Trump's infrastructure plans. And Hobby did all of that then because Trump didn't get along well with the Republicans in the House. Hobby took all of that, streamlining it, and much of it he applied to Pebble. The biggest thing that he did is, historically, when you go through permitting, the public or people interested, they only get to see the document when it's finished. They never get to see all the detailed information. Tom Collier added, you may still cause a lot of environmental damage, but if it's the least practical alternative to get your permit, you get it. So I'm going to tell you guys a couple things that we're sharing with our major investors that we don't want to be completely public at this point. I made a phone call to David Hobby on a Saturday, who runs the permitting process here in Anchorage, and he's become somewhat of a friend. I've known him for 25 years, and said to him, what the hell is going on? And this was in reference to a story talking about the Trump administration potentially turning down the mine. And David Hobby, he just kind of laughed. I sat down with them, shown them what's going to be in the document that I'm going to send them, and he's talking about mitigation, and they're pleased with what's in there. They don't see any problems with what's there, and I believe that they're going to approve it. So the investigator says, and so essentially what you guys are discussing is that if the mitigation plan that you guys are going to present in the next couple weeks follows what you've presented with him a few days ago, there shouldn't be any major sort of comments or ask for changes. Tom Collier says, that's correct. Let me tell you what he said. Let me tell you what he said exactly. So this is a guy who sent us a letter, and I'm sure you've seen the letter that outlined what he wanted in the way of a mitigation plan. We went and briefed him on the mitigation plan, and he said to us, this satisfies all the issues we raised in our letter. This mitigation plan, where we had to go from what was called out of watershed mitigation to in-kind in watershed mitigation. As soon as that became a requirement, they let us know that was back in June, so that allowed us to put the team into the field and get the work done. So we did. We had 2 months notice on that, and we spent with 2 teams in the field getting all of that work done. In regards to the EPA, the investigator asked, so they're all in agreement with, and when he's talking about they're talking about the EPA, that Pebble should go on. And the interesting thing here about this decision is it makes it better for all of us. If they do nothing, we prevail. This is Tom Collier talking. So they have to take some action in order to stop us, and there's just no way they're going to put their head up and take this kind of action, especially given the record they've developed so far where they officially say we're not going to file a 3B letter. So the investigator questioned, so they have to look the other way, and that's good for us. And Tom Collier said, that's correct. Go outside. He's talking about the EPA. That's correct. Go outside and take a smoke, and we're done, right? Those are just some excerpts from the tape. Meanwhile, our tribes have been left to defend Bristol Bay with what's reported in the news, a clear violation of how this permitting process is meant to run. Pebble is working hand in hand with the Corps, calling and laughing with top Corps officials on a Saturday about the potential of a permit denial, and using our governor as a puppet to the White House. But still, Bristol Bay tribes have been left to navigate this process that's going to determine our people's futures by what we see on the news and the crumbs of information the Corps has shared with us. Pebble's permitting process is the product of deceit and underhanded tactics. It's shameful. The Army Corps and the EPA are playing their games. They say they remain objective and show no favor to one side or the other. But we now know that that could not be farther from the truth. It's clear from the Pebble tapes the EIS process must be scrapped and full investigations must be launched to uncover the full extent of Pebble's influence over the permitting process. I'll close by saying you cannot mitigate the devastating impacts Pebble will have on Bristol Bay's native people and our way of life. Not with their fake mine plan to mine less than 15% of the deposit, not at its full build out. Bristol Bay is not meant to be a mining district. We are Salmon people, and we have inherited the responsibility from our ancestors to be strong stewards of this amazing place, and we will not waver in protecting it for our future generations. Our fight is far from over, and we will continue to use every tool available from Congress to the courts to protect our way of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers. We did get some questions in, and one just quick comment. Someone pointed out that my what is Bristol Bay had some inaccuracies, and I apologize. I did get that from the web, and I recognize this project has changed, so some of my details may have been inaccurate, and to the extent that those are, I apologize. But hopefully you got a flavor of the project between that as well as the speakers. So with that, I think the first question is to the Army Corps, and the question is, why not just deny Pebble's application rather than give them more time to come up with a mitigation plan?
Thank you. This is Sheila Newman. Yeah, I know that is something that has come up repeatedly, and I think that Administrator Hladick actually, referred to it as well. We have to actually go through the process as mandated through laws that Congress has passed and regulations that inform us in how we must proceed when any applicant submits a permit application. We don't start out with denial. We start out by reviewing the application. In this case, we went through the environmental impact statement, which was part of the process to inform decisions that we have to make under 2 federal acts that Congress has charged us with, and we have not yet made those decisions. And we are still in the midst of the process.
Thank you. We have 2 questions about the Pebble tapes, one specific to the Corps, and I think one's to EPA as well. So I guess I'll start out with the general one. Do the agencies have any response to what you heard on the Pebble tapes?
I don't think we have an official response right now, but personally it's kind of shocking to see that. And we'll see what the congressional delegation says about that, because I do believe Tom Collier had testified before Congress. So I'm sure they're there will be shortly a response to that. But, you know, for me personally, we've heard anecdotally that, you know, that Pebble had been telling their prospective funders that this mine was bigger than what they had applied for. I mean, we know that the size of the ore body is much larger than what they've submitted. So on the one hand, it's not shocking to that, you know, they're telling people it's 180 years when you can see it, what the ore body is and what the permit is for 1/10 of the size of the ore body. And I'm fairly certain that there's satellite deposits that are out there, Shotgun Hills, etc. So, but I guess what's shocking is some of the omissions about their the way they talk to U.S. U.S. senators, about the governor, etc. And I don't know. We're in a way reeling from what we've witnessed and seen, but at the same time they have a permit in front of us, and we've got to continue to review that permit because it's not a legal proceeding or anything like that, though there may be legal proceedings that follow that. I'm unsure, but my initial response is I'm a little bit shocked that people would talk to investors like that. And I've been involved in this project for some 15 years. I lived out in Bristol Bay and Dillingham, and I can assure you that everybody in my shop, there's nobody has been in the back pocket of the mine, but we've been accused of that. And knowing Sheila and Dave Hobby, they can speak for themselves, but having worked with them, we've worked really hard to make sure that there's no underhanded or backroom deals that are going on this project. So I guess that's where I'll stop for right now.
Hey, so this is Colonel Bladel again. So we put out a press release a couple days ago on the 22nd, and yeah, I'm just going to echo what we already said in that release. We have we trust and are completely confident in the integrity of our regulatory team and our process. We're going to uphold and follow the laws and regulations that govern how we process permits from reception until decision. So that's kind of all I got to say.
This is a follow-up to the core, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but I'll ask the question. How do you reconcile the difference between what you were presented in the application and the characterization of the project that was made in the tapes?
This is Sheila Newman again. Yeah, we received that information the same time you all did, and so we have questions, and internally we are considering what our course of action will be, but guaranteed there'll be questions.
And this wasn't asked, but just as a follow-up, will any sort of decision in that regards be made public so that folks that are interested understand what the Corps' decision is?
All through this process, every time we've asked the applicant, Pebble, a question, we've done so in a request for additional information, and every single time we have posted those questions and answers to our public website, pebbleprojecteis.com, so we would not change course now.
Thank you. Here's a general question, and I think anybody who wants to take this one on probably could. These projects are on unceded territory of Native people. Why aren't we not talking about reconciliation?
it is the Pebble is on state land and federal land. Is that right? But it would cross, the access would cross the native lands. Is that correct?
I am not sure.
I'm not sure either.
That is all the questions that folks have posted. Do folks have any last thoughts while we wrap up this panel that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I'd like to just share my thoughts as being a co-regulator on the 404 and having worked on this project a long time. I'm completely aware of how it's viewed by the tribes in Bristol Bay, by the fishermen in Bristol Bay. I know lots of folks who live out there and have contacted me over time about this project. And believe me, everyone is concerned about, making sure that we have done our job properly. And I feel very good about the comments that we have provided and the work that we have done in this process, getting to this point. And we are going to continue to work with the Corps whenever we're asked for input on any said mitigation plan that comes forward. I'm interested in seeing the 401 certification from the state and working towards, some of the big concerns that even I have on the project. So with that, I appreciate everybody's time today and hope that everybody stays well.
Hey, so this is Lieutenant Colonel Bladel, and I just want to say thank you for the invitation to take part in this panel. I know with everything going on this year, these are we still struggle. Obviously, the fact that we're doing this over the phone and not within the Zoom call, the struggles with communications regularly. So I appreciate having this opportunity. Although I admit we can't do it in person, one of my favorite things I've gotten to do here at the district is, getting to go out and meet people at either the public hearings or in government-to-government tribal meetings, or just in general, getting to talk with folks throughout the state on the various things the Corps does, because we do a lot more than regulate. But just thank you for the opportunity to sit down, even if it is virtual, to talk and answer any questions and listen. Yeah, that's the other part of having a conversation, right? So thanks a lot.
Hi, Rick. Can you hear me? This is Alannah.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just will echo everyone's thanks for coming today and tuning in. I want to thank you for stepping in to moderate. I want to thank the person who asked the question about reconciliation and unceded native lands. When a lot of those land decisions were made and these lines were drawn in the sand, our people weren't part of a lot of those decisions. And just like today, it's it's almost not funny, but ridiculous that here we are sitting talking about extreme decisions that are being made that are going to impact our people, and we feel like we're screaming underwater because our voices are not being heard in these federal and state regulatory processes. And yet we have, undeniable evidence that a Canadian mining company has unprecedented levels of access into these institutions, influencing their decision making. And while I say this with the utmost respect to the people on the phone, your response is not adequate and is not acceptable to the people of Bristol Bay. The fact that the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA know that this is a joke of a mine plan and a joke of a permit application for less than 15% of the ore deposit, and you're refusing to analyze the cumulative build out of the deposit over time and what those impacts would be on our people is a disgrace. This entire process has been a disgrace, and it is shameful. And we will not stop in our efforts to hold these government agencies accountable, because we have no choice, and we're going to do what we have to do to ensure that our people and our way of life is protected. Thank you.
This is Rick. There were, and hopefully folks don't mind, there were a couple of, as you all were giving your closing comments, there were a couple of folks that asked a couple of questions. So I hope you don't mind if we go ahead and ask those. One, I guess to Chris, is it too late for the EPA to exercise its veto authority?
Yeah, as far as the 404C, that's a dispute resolution process. And at this point, I would say no, because we're working well with the Corps, and the Corps and the EPA came to it was the Corps' decision to issue the letter of significant degradation, and we basically agreed with that. So we could always issue a 404C. It would be even after the mine is built. So there's some things that are still of concern to us, but at this point, we don't have the intent of issuing a 404C, because we are working well together with the Corps on it. So, but down the line, that could be a possibility.
All right, the next question's for Elena. Elena, the question came up about land ownership. Who owns the land that this is located on? I think it's state land, but can you clarify that?
Sure. As I talked about earlier, thanking the person who was talking about unceded native territories, when these lines were drawn in the sand, our people didn't have a big voice in that process. And when we're talking about waterways and poison flowing downriver, I just want to remind everybody that land ownership and a pretend line in the sand about who owns what land means nothing when toxic mine waste can be released into the headwaters of our watersheds to be dispersed throughout Bristol Bay. The actual deposit is currently on state of Alaska land, to answer that question. The transportation route spans many different landowners, and that's a huge remaining issue with development of the deposit overall. The Pebble Limited Partnership does not have access to the vast, a huge piece of, or pieces, I should say, of the northern transportation route in its current mine plan. So how that's considered a practicable alternative when we're talking about the LEDPA is another inconsistency in how these processes operate for in a realistic sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got one last question, and we're going to make the circle here. This is for the Army Corps, and then we'll wrap up the session. What is the Corps looking that has to change at the project, and why was the dam failure pulled out and made to only pipe damage? I'm not sure I entirely understand that question. Hopefully you do.
This is Sheila Newman. So I don't understand the question in its entirety. What is the Corps looking to change? Is that did I hear you correctly?
That's correct. I assume that's in regards to your latest determination. You know, what I guess what specifically has to change maybe for the project to move forward.
Sure. So yeah, let me say, well, one, the Corps is not looking for anything, and we're not asking for anything. We have definitely been asked to do a lot of different things that we can't do under our authority. But one thing that is clearly under our authority is identifying our findings and requirements to an applicant. So significant degradation is a finding, and we identified that finding to the applicant. The second thing we did was we identified the requirement to that applicant because of that significant degradation. So when we talk about compensatory mitigation, we're not looking for anything to change. We're looking for the applicant to comply with existing law. And we told them what the requirement is in existing law. It is 100% their responsibility and burden to determine whether they can do that and submit something to us for review. If they submit something to us for review, the only thing we will be looking at it for is rule compliance.
Okay. With that, I really want to appreciate give thanks to all our panelists for participating. I want to thank everybody who asked questions. This was a good discussion, very timely, and hopefully we'll have more discussions as time goes on about Pebble and its impacts to the community. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and thanks for everybody's time, and hope everybody stays well.
And I just wanted to say thank you, Rick, for your moderation of the Pebble panel, and also to say thank you to Chris Hladick for spending your morning with us. We really appreciated your time and all of this really important and timely conversation on the topics. You know, everything changes, it seems day to day. So I'm appreciative that the panel was able to address in real time the things that we're also experiencing in our day-to-day lives. So it's relevant, and I'm grateful for your time today.